Hello there, this is Dr. Dermot Hudson. I'm chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK and chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche Idea. I'm also an active member of the International Ukraine Anti-Fascist Solidarity, and I've taken part in a number of protests organised by them. I'm here today to speak to Points News about the question of US and British influence in the post-Soviet space, the former socialist countries, the former member nations of the former USSR, which, as we know, was dissolved in 1991, very much as a result of US intrigue and subversion. Clearly, these days, US influence is growing in the post-Soviet countries, the ex-USSR states, particularly in places like Kazakhstan, where the US attempted a colour revolution in 2022. The US has sent numerous agents into former member states of the USSR. It's created NGOs. It's stepped up propaganda aimed at those countries through social media, through other media, and a number of cases they've been successful in overturning elections in Ukraine in 2014, where they overturned an elected government, and it looks like they're trying to do the same in Belarus as well, where the elections are being condemned as being unfair, even before they've actually been held. I mean, this is quite crazy, but it shows the lengths that the US are prepared to go to. And NATO, an aggressive military alliance created by the US, is being expanded. There's some former member states of the USSR have actually joined NATO. There's even US bases in some of these countries. So, yes, I mean, US influence is growing considerably in the former USSR states. I think it goes without saying. In fact, it's actually an understatement. And of course, this is being pushed heavily by the US to counter both the Russian Federation, which has emerged as a powerful counterbalance to US power, and also is an anti-imperialist state which is cooperating with countries of the global south. And it's also been done to counter China. But there's a third reason, in my opinion. It's also to prevent anti-imperialist or leftist movements in these states. It's done to prevent the restoration of socialism in these states, and even the possible restoration of the former USSR. And a lot of the US, Britain's also trying to strengthen its influence in the post-Soviet sphere. And this is really being done on behalf of the US, because Britain is in the so-called special relationship with the US, which really means that British interests are subordinated to the US, and Britain acts as a poodle or a surrogate of the US. And Britain often assists the US in its subversion of other countries. The British intelligence service, MI6, is very active. I do not see British influence in these countries as in any way being positive, certainly not for the citizens of these countries. And for British people, it means that taxpayers' money is being wasted on schemes for regime change and so-called colour revolutions. And Britain would do very well to stay out of other countries. The British Empire is long since gone, and Britain is state with poverty, with unemployment, with austerity. People cannot afford to heat their homes. So, the British government would be well advised to concentrate on solving these domestic problems rather than interfering in other countries and trying to assist the US in promoting regime change in these countries. I think it is unlikely that there will be conflicts between the interests of the US and Britain in these countries because, as I said earlier, Britain is in a subordinate relationship to the US. British governments tend to ask how high when the US says jump. So, I think the possibilities for conflicting interests is very low. And even if there was a conflict of interest, I'm sure the subservient British governments would sweep it under the carpet. And lastly, I don't think the influence of Britain and the US is positive at all for these countries, the countries of the former USSR. In fact, I think it's extremely negative. Both the US and Britain have high levels of crime, high levels of conflict, particularly the US, high levels of homelessness. I mean, the US is got homelessness on a massive scale, even worse than Britain. So, what can Britain and the US offer these countries? The culture of the US and Britain is totally depraved and decadent. So that's not a good example either. And in fact, what the Britain and the US actually do is to try and push programs of privatization and austerity on these countries, like was done in Ukraine, where the new Ukrainian regime carried out cuts in pensions and public spending and carried out privatization, sold land to foreign interests. So the citizens of former USSR states will not benefit at all from British and US influence, and indeed it will be very detrimental to their interests. And I think they should fight to be independent from the US, Britain, and the EU, and also the IMF and the World Bank. Thank you very much for listening.